Forward.
On June 9th, 2018, a truck thundered down a dusty road in Afghanistan's Debala district. No plates, no brake lights, and a group of Afghan commandos and their US advisors blocking the road ahead. The vehicle doesn't slow down, in fact it speeds up. For a split second, every person in that blocking position has one terrifying question. Is this just another enemy fighter trying to flee the combat zone, or is this a bomb on wheels barreling towards their position? But the operators on the ground don't have time to debate, so instead, they act. In eastern Afghanistan, mountains cut the horizon like broken teeth, and every road bends just enough to hide what's waiting around the corner. To the men on patrol here, this valley is more than terrain, it's memory. Every slope, every culvert, every burned out car has a story, and too often, those stories end in fire. By 2018, the war had shifted east. ISIS had carved out enclaves in Nangahar's hills. They built networks of caves and rat lines that linked villages like veins, moving fighters, cash, and explosives from Pakistan's borderlands into the heart of Afghanistan. To stop them, Afghan special security forces and their US advisors launched a summer campaign to cut those veins one by one. The operation centered on the Debala district, a wedge of earth that for years had been a sanctuary for ISIS fighters and foreign jihadists. The mission was simple on paper: clear, hold, and deny, but every soldier in the fight knew what that meant. Miles of open road with no cover and an enemy who hid bombs in everything that moved. ISIS didn't fight for territory, they fought for spectacle. When they lost ground, they turned to suicide attacks, using pickup trucks loaded down with explosives to punch through patrols and convoys. In Nangahar, those trucks were everywhere, beaten up Toyotas, stolen Hiluxes, anything that could carry death at 60 miles an hour. For the US Special Operations Team assigned to Debala, this wasn't their first rodeo. Many had cycled through Helmand and Kunar years earlier. They knew how quickly a routine stop could turn lethal. When their Afghan partners planned a mission to block ISIS supply routes in early June, the Americans volunteered to help hold the western approach, a stretch of road known to locals as the Valley of Smoke. It wasn't just a scary nickname. The valley earned its name after months of airstrikes that left entire ridgelines scorched. The road itself was narrow, barely wide enough for two vehicles, and hemmed in by steep slopes perfect for ambushes. It was the last artery ISIS fighters used to move in and out of the Gurgaray village. Shutting it down would choke their logistics for good. That morning, the blocking element rolled out before dawn. 3 Afghan commando trucks in front, 2 US MATVs behind. Dust followed them like a banner. By 0600 hours, they reached the choke point and began setting up a checkpoint. They laid out their fields of fire with pre-sighted machine guns and marked range stakes in the dirt. To outsiders, it looked routine, another checkpoint in another Afghan valley, but inside the perimeter, tension sat thick. Everyone remembered what happened the month before. An ISIS suicide bomber driving a white pickup had rammed a police convoy not far from here, killing 7 Afghan officers. That's what shaped their mindset. Every dust trail on the horizon might be a bomb. Mid-morning, the heat rolled in fast, pushing the air past 100 degrees. The mountains swallowed radio signals. Inside the vehicles, the smell of dust, oil, and gunpowder clung to everything. Gunners checked their belts, riflemen adjusted optics, and somewhere down the valley, a faint engine growled. It's hard to describe the sound of a truck in Afghanistan. Out in the open desert, you hear it long before you see it. A thin whine that blends with the wind until it suddenly cuts through. The commando on Overwatch called it out. Movement, single vehicle, fast. This is the part every soldier remembers later, that first moment of contact. Not a firefight yet, but something on the edge of one. Radios crackle, safeties click off, and you feel time stretch. The truck rounds a bend, a cloud of tan dust behind it, moving faster than it ever should. It doesn't slow, it doesn't signal, it just keeps coming in hot. In counterinsurgency, hesitation can kill you, but so can acting too soon. In that road on Debala, the difference between caution and catastrophe was measured in seconds. That truck was now less than 200 meters out and closing in fast. What happens next is split-second judgment, a collision of training, instinct, and fear. And for the soldiers holding that road, it will decide whether they live or die. The truck came in from the south, a single vehicle bouncing through the heat, its silhouette growing sharper with each second. No markings, no tarp, no brake lights. To the soldiers at the roadblock, it was a moving question mark with one wrong answer. The Afghan commander quickly grabbed his radio. Unidentified vehicle 1 click out and approaching fast. The gunners adjusted their aim, barrels dipped slightly to track the road. The U.S. Special Forces advisor standing behind him lifted his hand, signaling to the team's interpreter to begin trying to signal the vehicle. The first step is always the same: visual warning, a hand signal, arms raised high with a clear stop gesture. In Afghanistan, even gestures can mean life or death. Most drivers slow, some turn around, but this one didn't do either. The truck held its line, the driver gripping the wheel. You could almost feel the hesitation inside every man on that ridge. No one wants to pull the trigger too early, but the rules of engagement are clear. Once a vehicle crosses the red line, the force must assume hostile intent. The lead commando fired a flare, a bright streak of red that hissed across the sky and burst above the road. The driver didn't react a bit. The truck just kept closing in. Now it was less than 300 meters out. Dust followed the hood. The Special Forces team leader keyed the radio. White light, warning shots. 2 short bursts cracked from an M249 on the Overwatch truck. Rounds stitched the dirt ahead of the vehicle, kicking up dust. Normally, that is all it takes. Drivers hit the brakes hard, throw up their hands, and back off. But this time, absolutely nothing. The truck just kept coming, even faster now, its tires throwing rocks behind it. One of the American advisors shouted out, "Danger line," meaning the trigger point had been crossed. Every gunner on site knew it by heart. If a vehicle breaches that invisible boundary, it's no longer a civilian truck, it's a potential bomb. The team leader then gave the order, engage and disable. The M249 on the flank roared to life.
Forward, forward. Arjira! Dir back, dir back.
Bursts of 5.56 traced through the glare, walking up the hood. The windshield spiderwebbed in an instant and the radiator burst. The truck blew through the checkpoint, but it didn't make it much farther. It swerved with its tires screaming against the dirt, then coasted sideways, rolling to a stop just past the checkpoint. For a few seconds, no one moved. The echoes of gunfire rolled down the valley and then vanished. The only sound was the hiss of a punctured radiator and the wind. Everyone watched, waiting for something. Smoke, an explosion, a secondary detonation, nothing. The order came down: cease fire and hold position. The gunners lifted their barrels and scanned the ridgeline. The Afghan commander spoke quietly into his mic. Possible VBIED disabled, standing by for EOD. The silence after the shooting. It's one of the strangest feelings in war. Your adrenaline's still surging, your mind is racing, and yet the world around you feels frozen. You start counting the seconds, waiting for the explosion that never comes. And that's when the training really matters, because in those moments, it's not over. It's never over. The real danger could still be hiding inside that truck. They had stopped the vehicle, but they didn't know who or what was inside. And in Nangahar, that uncertainty was as deadly as any firefight. The next move had to be deliberate and by the book. When the last shot echoed across the valley, time seemed to stop. The pickup just sat there, idling for a heartbeat. Then the engine coughed and died. No flames, no detonation, just silence. For the soldiers holding that road, this was the moment between life and death. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder if the storm is really over or just catching its breath. According to standard operating procedure, nobody rushes forward. Every VBIED they've ever seen starts the same way: a dead vehicle, motionless, driver slumped, then seconds later, the explosion. So they do what their training demands: establish a standoff perimeter 100 meters, no movement inside the bubble until the scene is declared cold. Overwatch teams shift to glass the vehicle, spotting scopes, thermals, anything that might reveal body heat inside. The US team sergeant kneels behind the MATV hood, eyes glued to his optic. No movement, he says quietly. Drivers down, passenger seat empty. The Afghan commander nods, relaying the call over the radio. Everyone holds their position. 10 minutes crawl by, then the sun climbs. Dust floats like a fog. They watch for the telltale shimmer of leaking fuel, but nothing. Then, the first small victory. No secondary ignition, no detonator wire visible. Still, the convoy stays frozen. An American combat engineer steps forward, slow and methodical, unspooling a fiber optic camera on a telescopic pole. He angles it toward the truck's cab. The screen shows only cracked glass and a motionless driver. Every movement is deliberate. In this valley, impatience kills. Finally, the call goes out for EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. 2 specialists roll forward in a Humvee packed with sensors and a Talon robot. They deploy it from the rear ramp, a metal crawler with a camera arm. It hums down the road, its tracks kicking up little curls of dust. From the monitor feed, they get the first close look inside the cab. The driver's upper body is collapsed over the steering wheel. There's no vest, no trigger cord. Instead, they see what looks like a handheld radio and an AK resting between the seats. A backpack sits in the passenger's floorboard, and that's what makes everyone freeze again. EOD extends the robot arm, lifts the flap inside, loose blasting caps, electrical tape, and a small spool of wire. Not a bomb yet, but all the ingredients of one. With the area declared cold, the Afghan commandos advance. They clear the cab, weapons up, every movement rehearsed. The US advisor follows, keeping his rifle low but ready. Inside the bed, they find what the Valley Roads have been carrying for months: 2 jerry cans of fuel, 3 sacks of ammonium nitrate, and a half-built detonator switch. ISIS was using this truck to shuttle bomb materials between strongholds and maybe more. One commando finds a folded piece of paper wedged under the seat, a crude map with a single road marked in red leading toward Jalalabad. It isn't much, but it's proof. A glimpse into how the network moved its bombs across the province. Back at the convoy's Tactical Operations Center, the team radios in a SIG-ACT report. Significant activity. 1 vehicle engaged, disabled, negative detonation. 1 EKIA, bomb-making materials recovered. It sounds routine on paper, but for everyone who stood behind those guns, it was anything but. Stopping that truck meant stopping a future attack. Maybe a market bombing, maybe a patrol convoy. No one will ever know exactly what it was meant for, only that it never made it to its destination. There's a strange quiet after missions like this. The adrenaline fades, replaced by something heavier. Relief, tangled with guilt. You tell yourself it was the right call, that you followed the rules, and that you saved lives, but part of you still wonders who was behind that will. Was it a true believer, a carrier, or someone forced into it? That's the burden soldiers have to carry, not just the noise of war, but the silence that comes after. In the days that followed, Afghan commandos and their US Special Forces advisors pushed deeper into the valley, clearing compound after compound. Every step forward uncovered the skeleton of a crumbling network: weapons caches, bomb-making supplies, propaganda leaflets written in Pashto and Arabic. The locals, long caught between sides, began pointing out ISIS positions. The tide was turning at last. The Debala offensive was part of a broader joint effort between Afghan Special Security Forces and US Special Forces advisors. Over the course of several weeks, they dismantled what had once been one of ISIS-K's largest safe havens, a pocket that stretched between Gurgore and the Pakistan border. According to official reports, more than 170 ISIS fighters were killed. US aircraft struck mountain strongholds, Afghan units secured supply lines, and destroyed training camps that had churned out suicide bombers for years. The group's entire command structure in that sector collapsed. For the first time in years, villagers could walk the main road without fear of being stopped or punished by ISIS patrols. The black flags that once flew above homes were gone, replaced by green and red banners of Afghanistan. From a tactical perspective, operations like Debala proved the value of precision interdiction, stopping the threats before they could strike, cutting off logistics before they became attacks. The disabled truck on that June morning became part of a pattern, a ripple that spread across the province. Each seized vehicle, each intercepted carrier stripped ISIS-K of its ability to maneuver. And once mobility was gone, everything else followed. Their supply lines dried up, their foreign recruits were isolated, and their leadership was trapped in the mountains with no escape route. By mid-summer, Debala, once a sanctuary, had become a graveyard for ISIS-K's ambitions. But victories like this never came free. For the Afghan commandos, every mile gained came with a cost. Long days under fire, roadside bombs, friends lost in combat. For the Americans advising them, it meant watching their partners bleed for their country, men they trained, fought alongside, and trusted with their lives. And yet, in those moments between battles, something deeper grew. A bond not forged by politics or paychecks, but by survival. US and Afghan soldiers shared meals, stories, even laughter between firefights. They built something ISIS could never understand: unity. When the operation finally ended, many of these same commandos returned home to provinces that still bore the scars of war. They'd cleared the valley, but the fight for Afghanistan's future was far from over. Debala was more than a local fight, it was a template. Its success reshaped how coalition forces targeted ISIS, choked their movement, intercept their logistics, and deny them the ability to mass. Months later, similar interdictions took place in Kunar, Nangahar, and Wardak, all using lessons written in the dust of that valley. If you've ever wondered what courage looks like in the real world, it isn't loud. It's a steady breath, a finger resting on a trigger, a calm voice saying disable the vehicle while your heart pounds in your ears. It's doing what has to be done because hesitation costs lives. In the end, Debala wasn't about one truck or one firefight. It was about what those seconds represented: clarity in chaos, discipline in fear, and the weight of decisions no one ever sees. The interdiction that day shows how modern warfare isn't just fought with firepower, it's fought with judgment. The soldiers on that road used escalation of force exactly as trained: visual signal, warning flare, warning shots, then disabling fire. They stopped a potential VBIED, recovered bomb-making materials, and prevented another attack without a single friendly casualty. Strategically, Debala marked the collapse of one of ISIS-K's last major corridors in Afghanistan. After the valley was cleared, the group's movement through Nangahar was broken. Air power, interdictions, and local intelligence working together. That's how ISIS-K was dismantled, not in one decisive strike, but in 1,000 small ones just like this. For the men who fought there, it wasn't about statistics or territory, it was about keeping each other alive. Every time they stopped a vehicle, every time they disarmed a roadside bomb, it meant someone else got to go home. War isn't won by glory, it's won by moments of clarity, courage, and restraint. The soldiers who stopped that truck may never make headlines, but what they did that day saved lives, and that's what matters most. Because in war, it's not always about the battles everyone remembers, sometimes it's about the ones that no one ever hears about.